For 5 years, I measured my life in 3-hour intervals. That's how often my mother needed help during the night. Medication, bathroom, comfort when the pain broke through and she couldn't remember where she was or why it hurt so much. I gave up my job. I gave up my apartment in the city. I gave up dating, friends, any life that existed outside the careful routine of keeping someone alive who was slowly dying anyway. My sister visited twice in those 5 years. Twice. But 3 weeks after we buried our mother, she walked into the house with a lawyer's business card and a list of everything she thought she deserved. She looked around the kitchen, where I'd prepared 1,000 soft meals, where I'd crushed pills and measured liquids, and learned to function on 2 hours of sleep. And she said the will wasn't fair, that our mother hadn't been in her right mind, that I had influenced a sick woman to steal her inheritance. But to understand how my own sister became a stranger, I need to go back to the beginning. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what you're doing right now while you listen. Cooking, driving, taking a quiet moment? Your presence means something. Quick note: some details have been adjusted for storytelling, but the message at the heart of this is what truly matters. My sister arrived 3 days after our mother's funeral with a stranger who looked at our house the way appraisers look at property. I am Leonie Ashford, 37 years old, and for the past 5 years, I have been exactly one thing: my mother's caregiver. My mother, Norma Ashford, died at 68 on a Tuesday morning in early November. The funeral had been small. I'd handled everything alone. When the doorbell rang that Thursday afternoon, I was still in the same clothes I'd slept in. The house smelled like wilting lilies, and I hadn't opened the curtains since the cemetery. My sister Celeste Whitaker, 42, walked through the door dressed in black Armani, trailing her husband and a man she introduced as his friend. Philip, mid-40s and uncomfortable, stayed near the door and said almost nothing. The stranger with them looked at our family home with eyes that assessed square footage rather than memory or grief. "This is Philip's friend from the city," Celeste said. "He wanted to pay respects." "The service was Tuesday," I said. The stranger's gaze had already moved past me to the crown molding in the entry hall, then down to the original hardwood floors. "Beautiful home," he said. "Original molding?" I didn't answer. I stepped back and let them in. We moved to the living room where funeral flowers still sat browning on every surface. The stranger walked the perimeter slowly, eyes catching on windows, corners, ceiling height, not the photographs on the mantel, not my mother's quilt, just the structure. Celeste sat on the sofa and made small talk about the drive. The drive wasn't bad, only an hour. The stranger paused near the window. "How long has the family owned this property?" 42 years, I said, "since I was born." He nodded, still examining the window frames. "What kind of person brings a stranger to appraise a house 3 days after a funeral?" Celeste opened the folder she'd been holding. Inside were printed documents, pages marked with tabs. "We should talk about the house," she said. "And mother's accounts." I watched her flip through the pages. "There's paperwork to handle, decisions to make," she continued. "We'll need to know about the deed, the mortgage status, whether there are any outstanding liens." Philip shifted near the door. The stranger had moved on to examining the built-in bookshelves. Celeste talked about property taxes, insurance policies, bank accounts. She talked for 5 minutes about assets and signatures. Then she paused, glanced at me as if suddenly remembering I was there, and asked, "So, how were her last few days?" I looked at my sister, at the folder in her lap, at the stranger still cataloging the dimensions of our mother's living room. She had asked 9 questions about money before she asked a single question about how our mother died. I didn't answer my sister's question that afternoon. I closed the door behind them and didn't open it again for a week. I found the truth about my sister in the bottom drawer of my mother's nightstand. written in careful columns that added up to $47,000. 7 days after the funeral, I was sorting through my mother's bedroom. The closet first, then the dresser, saving the nightstand for last. The bottom drawer stuck when I pulled it. Inside, lavender sachets released their fading scent. Beneath them, old photographs, and tucked against the back, a small blue notebook. I opened it expecting recipes. My mother used to copy them down from cooking shows, but the first page stopped me cold. Celeste, March 2018. Tuition shortfall, $3,000. The handwriting was my mother's, precise and steady. No notation of repayment. I turned the page. Celeste, August 2019. Apartment deposit, Manhattan, $8,500. Again, just the date, the reason, the amount. I kept reading. Celeste, January 2021. Credit card debt, $12,000. Celeste, June 2021. Emergency car repair, $2,000. Celeste, November 2022. Property tax help, $6,000. Page after page. 7 years of documentation, each entry in the same neat hand, each amount recorded without comment. My mother had tracked every loan that went to my sister. I counted them twice, $47,000. Not one entry marked paid or returned. I sat on the floor staring at numbers that made my 5 years look different. While I'd been caregiving, my sister had been borrowing money she never repaid. What kind of mother keeps perfect records of betrayal but never speaks the words out loud? Then I saw the envelope. It had been underneath the notebook, sealed, my name written across the front. Below my name, a date, November 6, 2025, the day of the funeral, and beneath that, underlined twice, for Leonie, open after 30 days. I held the envelope up to the light, but the paper was too thick to see through. The seal was intact, pressed down firmly. My mother had meant for it to stay closed. I looked at the date again. November 6. Today was November 13, 23 days left. I placed the envelope back in the drawer exactly where I'd found it, beneath the notebook of debts my sister would never acknowledge. My mother had written a date and added one clear instruction: wait 30 days. I could wait. I'd waited longer than that already. I closed the drawer and sat in the quiet of my mother's room, surrounded by her things, holding the knowledge of what she'd kept hidden. And for the first time since she died, I wondered what else she'd known. The envelope stayed in the drawer. 3 days passed while I waited, the kind of waiting that feels like holding your breath underwater. I kept my routine. Coffee in the morning, sorting my mother's things room by room, not thinking about what was written on pages I wasn't allowed to read yet. The email arrived at 9:47 on a Wednesday morning, and my sister had forgotten to remove my name from the CC line. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm. The notification appeared in the corner of the screen. New message from Celeste Whitaker. The subject line made me pause. Estate of Norma Ashford, initial consultation. I clicked it open. The email wasn't addressed to me. It was sent to someone with a law firm email address I didn't recognize. My name appeared in the CC field along with one other address. An accident. A clerical error. The kind of mistake people make when they're forwarding messages quickly and forget to check who's included. I started reading. Celeste had written to this lawyer about our mother's estate. She explained that the will left everything to her younger sisters, who had lived with their mother for the past 5 years. Then she added, "My sister lived off our mother during this time without financial contribution or the ability to support herself independently." I read that line again. Lived off our mother. She continued, "Given my mother's serious illness during the period when the will was executed, I believe there are grounds to examine her mental capacity at that time. There may have been undue influence from my sister, who was financially dependent and stood to gain significantly." The language was careful, professional. The kind of phrasing someone uses when they want to sound reasonable while making an accusation. I scrolled down. She'd outlined her concerns in bullet points. The timing of the will, my mother's diagnosis, my presence in the house, the fact that I'd had no income for 5 years. 5 years of caregiving reduced to one phrase. Lived off mother without contributing. I set the coffee cup down. My hand was steady. I felt very calm. I read the email a second time, slower now, noting each phrase. Not suspicion anymore, but documentation. My sister had written down her strategy, put it in professional language, sent it to a lawyer, and accidentally copied me on the message. She'd given me proof of exactly what she planned to claim: that I was a freeloader, that I'd manipulated a sick woman, that the will should be questioned because I'd unduly influenced our mother. All of it in writing, time-stamped, permanent. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the screen. The coffee had gone completely cold. Outside, the morning was bright and ordinary. Inside, I was holding written evidence of my sister's intentions. I closed the laptop without replying, without forwarding, without deleting. My sister had just given me something she didn't know she'd given. Proof, in writing, of exactly what she planned to say about me, and proof of exactly what she believed. The envelope in my mother's drawer could wait 19 more days. This couldn't. I didn't reply to the email. I saved it in a folder I created just for that purpose, time-stamped and preserved. Then I waited to see what my sister would do next. 4 days after the email, my sister arrived with a folder, a pen, and the kind of smile people use when they're about to ask for something they don't deserve. She came alone this time. No husband. No stranger assessing crown molding. Just Celeste in a cream sweater and dark jeans, looking softer than she had at the funeral, more approachable. "Can we talk?" she asked from the doorway. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read her email 4 days earlier. She didn't know that yet. She opened the folder and pulled out a document, several pages stapled together. "I had someone draft this up," she said. "Nothing complicated. Just a fair split. No court, no drama." She slid the papers across the table toward me. "We sign, file with the county, and it's done. Clean and simple." I picked up the document. "Let me read it." The first page was exactly what she described. An agreement to divide the estate 50-50. The house would be sold, proceeds split evenly, retirement accounts divided, assets distributed. The language was clear and straightforward. I turned to the second page. Celeste watched me read. Her hands were folded on the table, relaxed. She'd rehearsed this. The friendly approach, the reasonable offer, the simple solution. I found it in paragraph 3 of page 2. The clause was buried in standard legal formatting, easy to miss if you were reading quickly. The signatory hereby waives all rights to contest or claim interest in any additional assets, accounts, or financial instruments discovered after execution of this agreement, including but not limited to previously undisclosed holdings, investments, or property interests. I read it twice to be sure I understood. Why does a simple 50-50 split require language about assets that haven't been disclosed? I looked up from the document. My sister was still watching me, that careful smile still in place. "What undisclosed assets?" I asked. The smile faltered. "Just for a second." "What?" "This clause," I said, pointing to the paragraph. "It mentions undisclosed holdings." "What are those?" She shifted in her chair. "It's just standard language. Protection for both of us." "Protection from what exactly?" She looked at the paper, then back at me. The pause before she answered told me everything. "It's just legal phrasing," she said. "These documents always include comprehensive language to cover any eventuality. So there are no undisclosed assets?" "I didn't say that." "Then what did you say?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Look," she said finally, her voice taking on an edge. "Mother had accounts, investments. Things might surface later. This protects us both from having to revisit everything." Things that might surface, I repeated. That you know about and I don't? She stood up. Are you going to sign it or not? I folded the document and set it on the table between us unsigned. My sister's eyes went to the paper, then back to my face. The question I'd asked hung in the air. What undisclosed assets? And her silence was the only answer I needed. My sister left without the signature she'd come for. I watched her car pull away from the curb, then closed the door and went looking for something I'd put away 2 years ago without understanding why it mattered. The business card was exactly where my mother said it would be, in the blue recipe box, tucked between her handwritten lasagna recipe and the pot roast she made every Sunday. I pulled it out and held it up to the morning light. Vernon Thornton, estate planning attorney. An address in Manhattan. A phone number printed in small professional type. I remembered the day my mother gave it to me, 2 years ago, after an appointment I'd driven her to in the city. She'd handed me the card in the parking garage and said, "Keep this somewhere safe." I'd asked why I needed it. She'd smiled and said, "Just in case." Just in case. 2 years ago, when my mother handed me that card, I thought it was just paperwork. Now, I understood it was a map. I dialed the number. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. Thornton Law Office, a woman's voice said, crisp and professional. Rachel Donovan, the secretary who answered Vernon Thornton's office line, had the efficient voice of someone who'd handled estate matters for years. My mother, Norma Ashford, passed recently, I said. I believe your office has her will on file. Let me pull that file, she said. I heard keys clicking in the background. Yes, estate of Norma Ashford, executed 2 years ago. I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you, I said. Has anyone else contacted you about this will? There was a pause, just long enough to notice. Before I tell you what she said next, if you're still here with me, comment A if you think my sister knew who this lawyer was, or B if she had no idea. Add Y in 5 to 10 words. Please note, this story includes fictionalized elements for narrative purposes, but the lessons are real. Yes, Rachel said finally. We received an inquiry last week about this estate. I didn't ask who, I already knew. I see, I said. Can I schedule an appointment with Mr. Thornton? Of course. How is Monday at 2 p.m.? That works. I'll put you down, she said. Do you have any questions I can answer before then? No, I said. I'll see you Monday. I hung up and set the phone on the table beside the business card, beside the recipe box my mother had directed me to 2 years earlier. My sister had contacted the same office. She'd tried to hire the lawyer who'd helped our mother write the will she was now trying to break. She didn't know yet. But in 2 days, when we both walked into that office, she would find out exactly how much our mother had prepared for this moment. I arrived at Vernon Thornton's office 15 minutes early. Strategic positioning, something I'd learned from years of reading situations before they unfolded. The waiting room had leather chairs arranged in a semicircle. I chose the one facing the door and settled in with my coat folded across my lap. Rachel, the secretary, offered coffee. I declined. My hands were steady, but caffeine felt like an unnecessary risk. At exactly 2 o'clock, the elevator chimed. Celeste stepped out, wearing a charcoal suit I'd never seen before, probably purchased specifically for this meeting. She approached the reception desk with the confident stride of someone who believed she was about to win. I have a 2 o'clock with Vernon Thornton. She stopped mid-sentence when she turned and saw me. What are you doing here? I met her eyes without flinching. I have an appointment. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, anger, calculation. Before she could respond, Vernon Thornton emerged from his office, 55, precise and professional in a navy suit, reading glasses perched on his nose. Ms. Whitaker? Miss Ashford? Please come in. Celeste glanced at me, then followed him inside. I came last, closing the door behind us with a soft click that seemed louder than it should have been. Thornton's office was exactly what I'd expected. Mahogany desk, floor to soiling bookshelves, diplomas arranged in perfect symmetry on the wall. He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. Celeste took one, I took the other, maintaining 2 feet of distance between us. Whitaker, Thornton began, opening a file folder. You indicated you wished to discuss contesting a will? Celeste leaned forward. My mother's will leaves everything to my sister. I believe she unduly influenced a sick woman. My mother wasn't in her right mind during her final months, and let me review the file. For 5 years, I'd been invisible in my own family. Now, in this office, being seen was all it took. Thornton turned pages with methodical precision, his expression unchanging. Then he looked up, not at Celeste, but at me. There was recognition in his eyes. He closed the folder. I cannot represent you in this matter, Miss Whitaker. Celeste blinked. I don't understand. I drafted this will. I was your mother's attorney. This creates an insurmountable conflict of interest. I can recommend other attorneys if you'd like, but I cannot ethically represent you in challenging a document I personally prepared. The color drained from my sister's face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. The strategy she'd built, the narrative she'd prepared, all of it collapsed in the space between Thornton's words and her stunned silence. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I simply sat there, hands folded in my lap, while my sister's world rearranged itself. My sister looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time since our mother died. I held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds, gave one small nod, the same nod I'd learned from years of understanding without needing words, and walked out. Behind me, I heard her trying to speak, but there was nothing left to say. The phone rang at 11:47 that night, and I knew before I answered that it would be my sister calling without a script for the first time in her life. I'd been lying in the dark since I got home from Manhattan. When the phone lit up on my nightstand, Celeste's name glowed against the darkness. I picked up, said nothing. I need to talk to you. Her voice came through different, no careful pacing, no rehearsed tone, just exhaustion and something close to desperation. I'm listening. Not like this, not with strategies. I sat up slowly, switching the phone to my other ear. Outside my window, the streetlight cast long shadows across the empty driveway. The house settled around me with November quiet. Philip owes money, Celeste said. A lot of money. We're losing the condo. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Business ventures that didn't work out. Investments that it doesn't matter. The point is we're months behind on the mortgage. Our credit is destroyed. I don't have choices here. I have debt collectors calling at work. Her voice cracked once. You don't understand the pressure of living in Manhattan, of maintaining. You're right, I said. I don't understand that pressure. She went quiet. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, uneven and shallow. But you never understood the last 5 years either. What it costs to watch someone die. This was the sister I'd been waiting to hear from, not the one with lawyers and strategies, but the one who was drowning and finally said so. Mom needed help getting to the bathroom at 3 in the morning, I continued. She needed someone to hold her hand through panic attacks when the pain medication stopped working. She needed someone to sit with her during the hours when she couldn't remember my name but knew she wasn't alone. That was pressure too. Different pressure. But you never asked about it. The silence stretched. I heard something that might have been a breath or the beginning of words that never formed. I never meant for you to. I know. And I did know. That was the strange part. She'd never meant for me to carry it all. She'd just assumed I would, the same way water finds the lowest point. I can't give you the house, I said quietly. I can't give you the money. But I'm sorry you're drowning. I am. The line went dead. No goodbye, no acknowledgement. Just a sudden absence of her breathing, replaced by dial tone. After she hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, phone still in my hand. Then I looked at the nightstand drawer where the envelope waited. 11 days left until I could open it. I wondered if my mother had known it would come to this, not just the money, but the moment when my sister would finally tell the truth. Day 30 arrived on a Saturday morning in December, exactly 1 month after I'd watched them lower my mother into the ground, and I opened the envelope she'd left me. I sat on her bed and held the envelope in both hands, my name written in her careful script across the front, the seal still intact. I opened it slowly. 2 pages, her handwriting clear and steady. Dated November 6, 2025, the morning of the funeral. My dearest Leonie, if you're reading this, 30 days have passed. I made you wait because grief has its own timeline, and I wanted you to have space before you understood my reasoning. I know about your sister's debt. I've known for years. Small signs at first, Philip's evasions, Celeste's tension whenever money came up, the way she stopped inviting me to their home. 2 years ago, I hired someone to look into their finances. I needed to make informed decisions about my estate. The loans total $47,000. Their credit is destroyed. The condo is mortgaged beyond its value. If I had split my estate equally, your sister's half would be gone to creditors within 6 months. Both of you would end up with nothing. My mother had seen everything I thought I'd hidden, understood everything I'd never said, and planned for the moment I would stand here reading this truth. By leaving everything to you, I'm protecting what I've built. Your sister made her choices. I cannot fix them, but I can make sure that at least one of my daughters has a foundation, somewhere stable to live, enough money to start over after 5 years of putting your life on hold. This is not favoritism, Leonie. This is mathematics. This is love for both of you, expressed in the only way that made sense. You gave me 5 years. I'm giving you a start. Mom, I read it twice. The paper felt thin in my hands, but the words held weight. I folded the letter carefully and walked outside to the small front porch. My mother had sat here every morning for 42 years. The herb garden she'd planted still showed frost-killed basil. The bird feeder hung empty, swaying in the wind. I sat in her chair. The tears came then, not the angry tears from the funeral, not the exhausted tears from the last 5 years. These were different, quieter. They came from the place where grief meets understanding. I sat on the porch where my mother had sat every morning for 42 years, letters still in my hands, and finally let myself cry. Not because I'd won something, but because for the first time since she died, I understood what she'd given me. Not just money or a house, but proof that someone had seen exactly who I was and loved me enough to plan for my future when I couldn't see past the next day of caregiving. 1 week after I opened my mother's letter, Vernon Thornton called to tell me my sister had hired a new lawyer and filed a formal contest to the will. I sat in his office on a Thursday afternoon. The city stretched outside his windows, gray and cold under December clouds. Your sister's new counsel filed a formal contest 3 days ago, Thornton said, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents spread across his desk. The claims are standard: lack of capacity, undue influence. I nodded. Even after the late-night phone call, even after whatever honesty had broken through, my sister had still made one final attempt. However, Thornton continued, setting the papers down and looking at me directly, I have a witness who can address both allegations directly. He pressed the intercom button. Rachel, please send Mrs. Sinclair in. The door opened, and Mildred Sinclair walked into the office. 70 years old with steady eyes and a librarian's precise diction, she'd lived next door to the Ashford family for 40 years and missed nothing. I'd known her my entire life, the woman who'd brought casseroles during my mother's final months, who'd waved from her porch each morning. Mrs. Sinclair, Thornton said, gesturing to the chair beside mine. Thank you for coming. She sat down, hands folded in her lap. Of course. You were the second witness when Mrs. Ashford signed her will 2 years ago. Can you describe her mental state at that time? Norma was sharp as ever when we signed, Mildred said without hesitation. She asked about every word, wanted to understand each clause completely before she initialed anything. Vernon had to explain the residuary provision 3 times because she wanted to be certain she understood the implications. Thornton made a note. In your observation, was there any undue influence? I watched Leonie care for her mother every single day for 5 years. Every day. I saw her help Norma to doctor appointments, saw her carry groceries, saw her sit on that porch reading aloud when Norma couldn't hold books anymore. If that's influence, it's the kind that comes from showing up. A stranger had seen what my own sister refused to acknowledge. 5 years measured in daily routines, in small exhaustions, in showing up. Mrs. Sinclair's testimony eliminates any legal basis for contest, Thornton said quietly. The will stands as written. Mildred rose to leave. She stopped beside my chair and placed her hand over mine, warm, papery, certain. Your mother talked about you, she said softly. She was proud. Every day. I just wanted you to know that. Mildred Sinclair left the office before I could find words to thank her for 40 years of watching, for remembering, for speaking when it mattered. Her hand had been warm on mine, and her voice had been certain. Your mother was proud. I sat in that office for a long time after, not because I needed to, but because I finally could. 3 months after my mother's funeral, on a Tuesday morning in February, my sister sent a text message that said only 2 words: I understand. I read it twice, standing in the kitchen with coffee cooling in my hand. No apology, no explanation, no request for reconciliation or acknowledgement of what had happened in Vernon Thornton's office, or the late night phone call, or the years before that. Just 2 words, sent at 7:43 in the morning from a number I hadn't blocked. I set the phone face down on the counter and didn't reply. The contest had been formally dismissed a month ago. The estate was finalized. The house was legally, completely, irrevocably mine. My sister's text changed nothing about that. It confirmed everything about us. I looked around the kitchen. Nothing had changed. Same white cabinets, same worn linoleum my mother had been meaning to replace for a decade. Same window over the sink where she used to stand and watch birds at the feeder. But it felt different, lighter, not empty the way I'd feared, but possible. For 5 years, this kitchen had been the center of carefully managed routines. Pills organized in weekly containers on the counter. Meals prepared soft enough for a woman who could barely swallow. The particular exhaustion that came from waking up every 3 hours to check if someone was still breathing, disguised as normalcy over morning coffee. I remembered my sister standing in this same spot 3 months ago, appraising everything with a stranger's eyes, calculating value while I calculated loss. Now it was just a Tuesday morning, mine. This kitchen had witnessed 5 years of slow grief. Now it was witnessing the first morning that felt like a beginning. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd sorted through loan documents, where I'd read legal papers, where I'd eaten dinner alone for months after the funeral. I typed into the search bar, Marketing Coordinator Jobs, New York. The cursor blinked, waiting. I'd been a marketing coordinator 5 years ago, before my mother got sick, before my life contracted to the size of one house and one person's needs, before I became the daughter who stayed. I didn't think about my sister's text. I didn't think about the contest or even about my mother's letter folded carefully in the nightstand drawer upstairs. I thought about tomorrow, about next week, about interviews and resumes and the small logistics of rebuilding a life that had been on hold. So long I'd forgotten it was mine to restart. My mother hadn't left me a victory. She'd left me a foundation, somewhere stable to stand while I figured out what came next. Proof that someone had believed I could begin again, even when I couldn't see past the next day of caregiving. I didn't reply to my sister's text. Maybe one day I would, maybe I wouldn't. It didn't matter the way I used to think things mattered. My mother hadn't left me a victory. She'd left me a starting point. And on a quiet Tuesday in February, with winter light coming through the window she used to stand at every morning, I finally understood the difference. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes the people closest to us can't see us at all. For 5 years, I told myself that staying silent would be enough, that my sister would eventually notice. I was wrong. Don't wait for validation from people who have decided not to see you. Your worth isn't measured by whether someone acknowledges your sacrifice. People might call this a revenge story. Some might even label it grandma revenge, though it was my mother, not my grandmother. But this isn't about revenge. Whether you're searching for revenge stories or tales of family justice, understand this. My mother didn't leave me everything to punish my sister. She left me a foundation because she witnessed 5 years of devotion that no one else saw. I believe God has perfect timing. When I read that letter 30 days after her funeral, I understood. Sometimes the people who truly see us leave us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. That's not a revenge story. That's love planning ahead. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to for more stories like this. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time matters. One final note. While some details have been fictionalized for storytelling, the heart of this message about being seen, about sacrifice, is very real.